Hi everyone, welcome back to another tutorial for earrings. It's super late at night, so hopefully I can get my words right. Anyway, I wanted to make this pair for you. There's a couple different types of ways you can do it, but we're going to do something with a little curve and adding some extra wire. As you can see, this one doesn't have any extra wire, but I'll just leave those to the side so you can take a look at them. I've got a few different tools here and I'll just name them as I go along. First of all, I am going to use some rose gold in a 19 gauge. You may use an 18 gauge as well. In fact, this earring here is an 18 gauge and this one's a 19 gauge. They both work really, really well. The nice advantageous thing about a 19 gauge is it's very light to wear, and so it won't be heavy or anything like that. All right, I'm cutting a 5-inch piece of 19 gauge. This happens to be rose gold, and it's already got a slight curve to it, which I will want for this sort of curve that we're going for. Anyway, I am going to try to find the midway point. I'm just going to mark it with a Sharpie. It's always good to have a fine point Sharpie on hand. So I'm marking that midway point. Then I'm going to take my chain nose pliers, and instead of grabbing right on the midway, I'm going to grab just to the side of it, and I'm going to make a bend. And I'm not going all the way that tiny. I'm just trying to go a little past 90 degrees because I can do some of it with my hands. Don't be afraid to bend your wire a little, because the more you work with wire, the less afraid and intimidated you'll be by it. So as you can see, I've got a similar shape on the top portion. I do want to get a little more curve going here. And if you don't have a pair of nylon jaw pliers, you can use your fingers, and you can apply some pressure with your thumb as you go. And I don't know if you can tell, I'm sort of moving the wire in a curved kind of motion. But I find that making a lot of pairs of earrings all the time, my thumbs and fingers will get very calloused. So I do appreciate the work that this nylon jaw plier will do for me. So I'm going to do a little bit of bending with the pliers. Okay, so we're getting a very similar shape. I'm going to go ahead and make a little bit more curved. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Tried a different background today with my placemat here. That is looking pretty good. I'm gonna do a little crisscrossing just to get it real close. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is, unlike this earring where it's just curved and comes to a straight point, this one has a slight out curve to it. So if you can imagine, the piece will come down and just slightly bend out. So I'm going to use my chain nose pliers again. So far I've really been using these a lot. Going to place it into my pliers, and I've made some marks on my pliers again with a Sharpie. You do not have to do this, but I find that if I'm doing something on multiple items that go together, I want to have some consistency. So at this point I'm going to grab it in the same spot on both sides and give it a little bit of a bend. See, I'm just grabbing, making a slight bend. So let's see, I can bend that one a little bit more. Oops, there we go. So now I've got the right shape. It's got the flare to accommodate the bead, and I'm going to do some hammering or texturing. The hammering does a nice job of getting the wire to be a little stiffer, and so it will hold its shape better. So I'm going to hold my hammer down here near the end. You don't want to hold your hammer up here or you're doing all the work. You want to hold it down here and let the hammer do the work for you. So I'm going to start just doing little hammers all the way around, trying not to hit my finger. Okay, and I'm going to do a little bit extra hammering right here where these little pieces flare out, because I want it to grip a little bit of that bead. All right, when I did that, it kind of misshaped a little bit, so you can just use your fingers to gently tug your earring so it's nice and flat again. And I think I can still curve it a little bit more together just to accommodate that bead. Alrighty. So the next portion is to put my bead in here. So this time I'm going to use some wire wrapping wire. This will go through the bead and allow me to wrap it around the frame, as well as this kind of extra wrap we're doing here. I'm going to need 6 inches for this. This wire is very pliable. I'm using a 26 gauge rose gold. You can use a 24 gauge, which is probably the most common. I do have a pair that I made with the 24 gauge. It's slightly thicker. I don't know if you can tell, it's just this is a little daintier, so I decided I would do the daintier wire. Alrighty. So just like in my other tutorial, we're going to anchor this wire around this frame, and I do that by placing my thumb on the frame and bending that wire just in half. It's still loose on here. I can take it off, but basically I want to get a bend right there. Then I'm going to grab the end with my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to wrap it pretty firmly around the frame. Now if it gets away from you a little bit, that's okay. I know you can probably see this isn't touching. You can actually grab with your flat nose here and just squeeze these together, and that sort of helps bring them together. Alrighty, and this wire I'm going to trim off, and I usually trim it on the back side of the earring, so that would be the side I didn't hammer. All right, next I'm going to put my bead through. I want this a little bit lower. Whoops, not quite that low. I'm moving the anchor point around here a little bit. All right, so I'm going to place this bead here. I kind of like it to be tight in between these two end pieces, so I don't want it to be too dangly, but I also don't want to squeeze the ends together so much that this can't be free a little bit. So I will hold the bead, the frame, then I will pull the wire wrapping wire through. And before I finish up, I want to make sure that's a good amount of space. And it is, so I'm going to wrap this around a few more times. I'm definitely getting out of hand here. Again, it's late at night, but I know I needed to do this tutorial today, so I'm trying to get it done. Okay. So I'm wrapping it around a few times. I wrapped this first one 4 times, so I'm going to wrap this other side 4 times. I'm having a little trouble getting these to be tight. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to take this end, and rather than cutting it, I am going to just start wrapping around the bead. And I'm not really doing any specific wraps. I'm just trying to hold it tight until I get to where I've just got a little tail on the back side. So it's wrapped around, and I'm going to take the tail, and there's a little space between the bead and the frame here, and I'm going to bend the tail up through that little bit of space and push it, if you can, up. Getting it pushed up, but it keeps getting hung up. There we go. Basically up until you can grab it from the other side. If you're using a delicate bead, you do want to be really careful, because if you pinch it too hard with your pliers or something, you can break your bead, and that is not a good thing to do. Okay, so I got the end up here. I'm going to try to grab it. I know it's probably really hard to see on this video, but I'm grabbing. Oh my goodness, I almost need magnifiers to grab this thing. Let's see if I can get it this way. This is probably the hardest part. Anyway, you're going to grab that piece and just pull it tight, and then your bead will be nice and anchored. And then you'll take your earring wire, which I will grab, and you're going to place your earring on the wire and bend it back. And there you have it, your brand new earrings. And like I said, if you decide you're just going to wrap an anchor on the sides, you do not have to cut 6 inches. You could cut 3 inches and have plenty to do this one. All right, if you have any questions, please comment, and otherwise enjoy your beading and wire wrapping.